Okay, that's maybe a little confusing clip, but that's from a movie called Awakenings from 1990. It's Robert De Niro. I don't know if he got an Oscar for it, but he should have. I mean, it's just an amazing performance, and of course Robin Williams, Dr. Malcolm Sayer, and De Niro plays the part of a patient. His name is Leonard Lowe. That's what was written on the paper, Leonard. And Leonard has this disease. It's called sleeping sickness. And it happened to a bunch of people back in the 1920s. This was 1969, and at that time, Leonard had been asleep in a catatonic state for 30 years. And, everyone had given up on him. In fact, the ward that he was in was filled with patients who had sleeping sickness, and they called the ward the garden, because all you need to do with these people is feed and water them. It was that hopeless. Well, Dr. Sayer comes in, and he's at first convinced of the same, but then over time realizes that there may be something that he can do for it. So he finds a drug that's used for Parkinson's disease, and he ups the dose, just gives them massive amounts of this drug. And he's sitting, as you saw, sitting by the bedside, and then he wakes up, and Leonard is gone. Sleeping sickness, you're in not only a catatonic state, but you're also frozen. You can't move. Or if you do move, it's very jerky movements. Doc, you may know a little something about this. And he's gone. So Dr. Sayer goes to find Leonard, finds him sitting up, and the doctor says, so I'll repeat it now. He says, "It's late. Everybody's sleeping." And Leonard gets that smile on his face and says, "I'm not sleeping." Isn't that amazing? So I wanted to show you this because we're in the book of Exodus now. We're in week 3 of our series. And at this point, I want to start talking about the people that God intends to save, the Israelite people, and exactly who they are at this time in their history. It's important because they are very much like Leonard was in Awakenings. They have been asleep for a long time as to who they are. They are Hebrews and they are slaves. And that's really all they know. So let's go back to the very beginning of the book, not the passage I read, chapter 1, verse 1 and following. And at the very beginning of the book of Exodus, the writer of the book of Exodus, Moses, lists out the 12 sons of Jacob, the 12 tribes of Israel, lists them by name. This is who is in Egypt, and it is the last time in the book of Exodus that those names are mentioned. Because, of course, something happens after that, right? As the story goes, there is a new Pharaoh who rises up in Egypt who does not know Joseph, one of the 12 brothers, and does not recognize what Joseph has done to save the Egyptian people. And so, first, they make it difficult for the Israelites, and then they put them in slavery, and then, gradual process over a period of centuries, literally, it gets to the point where they start killing the baby boys, throwing them into the river. In terms of who they are, now, by the way, this takes this is a period of over 450 years that this takes place. So when we get to this point in the story, they are in the 12th generation of slaves. The only character in the story that refers to them as children of Abraham is God. Everyone else refers to them, and they themselves refer to themselves as either Hebrews or slaves. Their identity has been lost. They are asleep as to who they are, and it's been that way for a long, long time. I mean, think about it for yourself. In terms of how you act and react and live and work in your community and in your home and with your friends, where did you get those cues? Most of them you got from your parents. Where did your parents get those cues? Most of them they got from their parents. And back and back and back it goes. And so they're no longer children of God. At least not the way they see themselves. No one sees themselves as none of them see themselves like that, and no one that is with them sees them as children of God. They are Hebrews and they are slaves. And as you know, we've talked about this before. When you are called a slave long enough, you begin to act like a slave. You begin to act like the names that you are called and the tags that you are given. They act like slaves. They think like slaves. They work like slaves. They play like slaves. They live with their families like slaves. Now, Book of Exodus is a story about the freedom of the slaves. But I will tell you this right now, that freedom by itself is not enough. Let's sing. Okay, I was told by someone close to me that I should pick fun songs this weekend. Fun songs? Good songs to sing. Good songs to sing. And this is a Swedish congregation, isn't it? And of course, Children of the Heavenly Father is a Swedish national anthem. Right now we're in the middle of the plagues, or we're just starting the plagues. And I will tell you that I could preach 5 or 6 or 7 sermons on this, because we all know the surface story, right? The Pharaoh, his heart is hardened, and he refuses to let these people go, and Moses has been called to go and seek that release from the Pharaoh and actually demand that release, right? And there's all kinds of interesting things that are going on. There's the surface story, the drama between Pharaoh and God and Moses and Aaron. There's that. There is a Pharaoh, a human being who has, because of his position, has begun to believe the fiction that he is actually the most powerful thing not only in the earth but in the universe. There's the hubris of such thing, that a single human being could be that powerful. And a country could be that powerful. And the way that becomes a cautionary tale for us, especially on a weekend like Independence Day weekend, right? And those are all great themes to preach about. I could spend a lot of time talking about them. But what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to notice some small things, because there's a subtext going on here. And if you notice, I'd like you to notice especially the conversation first between God and Moses and Aaron, and then Moses and Aaron and the Pharaoh. Because God has this plan for these people. And so he's taken the staff and he turns it into a snake. And now he wants Moses to go to the Pharaoh, and he wants him to use the staff to strike the water so that the water will turn to blood. And there are 9 more plagues coming just like this. But in the instructions that God gives to Moses and Aaron pass along to Pharaoh, God says this: the plague will come unless you let my people go. You ready for this? So that they might worship me. Got that? Let my people go so that they might worship me. We're used to Cecil B. DeMille and the movies, and we missed that little subtext. But I think it's the most important part of the sentence, that they might worship me. Now, mind you, this is not a God who needs his ego stroked. That's not why the worship. This is not a God who's expecting his due attention. That's not why the worship. This is a God who sees what 450 years of slavery has done to his people in terms of who they are and the identity that they have taken on. And yes, just like Leonard, they sort of know back there someplace that there was a time when they were not asleep, and that it's vaguely a good time. But in terms of who they are as children of God, it's been lost. And so God frees the people for the purpose of worship, so that the other part of the equation will be fulfilled. Freedom itself is not enough. They have to rediscover who they are. They have to reconnect with the fact that they belong to this God. And this is not a God who is a father. This is a God who is their father. And this is not a God who is distant and expects things from them. This is a God of self-giving love, who turns the world upside down and inside out, who humbles the proud and brings low those of the highest degree, simply because he wants his people to be free and to be whole. And the only way they can be whole again is to recognize who they are. They belong to a God of love. They belong to a Father. And that will set the pattern for the rest of their lives. When you belong to someone who is self-giving to the point of giving himself up, you become self-giving too. And whatever slavery it is, or whatever identity it was that was a part of your existence, goes away and is replaced by something greater and higher and deeper and more profound than anything you have ever known before. This is what God recognizes about his people. And the freedom has a purpose, so that they're not just free from Egyptian slavery, but they're free from this sense that they are slaves. And that's all that they could ever be. Let's sing. See, the thing about slavery is that there's a toxin that goes along with it, and it poisons your life. It poisons who you are. It poisons how you see yourself as a person. That's the problem with slavery. And the other thing about slavery is that it has this deceptive look, that when you're under its control, it looks like the way out is further into slavery. So, for instance, if someone has hurt you, it looks like the way out is to hurt them back, to get revenge. Or if you are lost and alone and you just want to forget about everything and not feel anything, what do? We turn to our sedatives of choice. Drugs, alcohol, work, busy schedules. And we do this not to reestablish our identity as people, but to simply deaden the pain. So the thing about slavery is that it's deceptive. It has a way of drawing you further in and pretending like that further in is the answer. It's the way out. Two illustrations that I have for you today. The first, a guy you probably know, and a woman you probably don't know. So the guy you know is Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper, if you're my age or a little older, you know well who he is. He was the shock rocker that did things like pull chickens' heads off, in his shows and drink their blood. He didn't really do that, but that's the show, and he just did things by shock. And I don't know if you know this about Alice, but he was the son of a Baptist evangelist, and his grandfather was a Baptist preacher, and his father-in-law was a Baptist preacher. And I just read an interview about Alice, and he talks about the way his life changed. And he said that out of that, I became sort of a prodigal child. And I ran as far away from that as I possibly could. And then I needed to get sober. And Jesus came and found me, he said. And it began to reshape his life. So that now, Alice Cooper, shock rocker, he's in church every Sunday. He has a Wednesday men's Bible study that if he's in town, he never misses. He has fully reconnected so that Christianity is the core and center of his life. And as he tells the story, he says, people come up to me all the time, friends come up to me and they say, look at everything that you've given up for this Christianity. And he says to them, yeah, like what? Dying from alcoholism? I'll take this any day of the week. Just radically redefined who he was. He was asleep, and Jesus touched him. He was convinced that the way out of his pain was to deaden it. And it just took him further down in. And Jesus touched him and woke him up, brought him home. Second illustration, a woman you probably don't know. Her name is Immaculate, and I will not try to pronounce her last name. She was 24 years old in 1994. She lived in Rwanda. She was a Tutsi, one of the two tribes in Rwanda. And she remembers waking up one morning to her brother, who said, the president of Rwanda has been shot out of the sky, and the Hutsis are blaming us. And so she ran to a neighbor, but her father told her to do this. The neighbor was a Hutsi, a Christian minister. And for the next 90 days, she and seven other women hid in this man's bathroom, 4 feet by 5 feet. And outside, they could hear the Hutsi rebels who were massacring everyone who was a Tutsi. In 90 days, 800,000 people were murdered in Rwanda. And while she's in the bathroom, she's praying the Lord's Prayer. And she can pray everything except that one line. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And she couldn't get by it. And she couldn't get by it. And she couldn't get by it. Let's watch the interview.
And we are joined live in the studio by Immaculate Ilevigeza, who is also the author of 2 books, Left to Tell and Led by Faith. Good morning.
Good morning.
You're trapped inside this bathroom.
Yes.
You have no idea when you're going to get out. You pray this prayer every day that when it comes time to forgive those who would trespass against you, you cannot do it.
I couldn't do that.
Could not say the words.
Yes.
What changed in your heart that made you say, even though death is outside my door, even though my family has been destroyed by these people, I will open my heart to them?
You know, when I said that prayer, I realized that one time it was a prayer that God Himself, our Lord, gave us. And when I said those, I remember that, you know what? I want you to help me to forgive. Help me out. And when I was able to open my heart just to help me out, that is really when I understood that these people are going through a state of mind I cannot go in.
Right.
And I want to understand what is going on in their hearts. And you know, when you try to understand, that is the only way you can really find forgiveness.
It's the other verse in the Bible, Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do, is what Jesus said. Still, we might, in any of our circumstances in everyday life, you were in the middle of a war. Your family, by and large, has been killed by these people. These people want to kill you. How do you find that spot to say, I don't hate you?
You know, the hatred, I went through a moment of rage. I went through a moment of when I wanted to kill them, just like they did to me. But especially that moment when I realized that I am lying. I'm saying words I can't do. And I really went on my knees and asked, help me out. That is when I found in my heart that it was possible to understand that the state of mind they're going through, I don't have
You don't have it.
I don't have it. And I don't have to hate them for me to find justice.
She couldn't do it herself, and she knew it. She had to be connected to someone who could, and who could show her the way. My friends, you are not going to get this stuff out of long walks in the woods. You're not going to get it on the golf course on a Sunday morning. You're not going to get it, as much as I love to be with my children, you're not going to get it driving to your children and your grandchildren and spending time with them. You're going to get it here. Let my people go so that they might worship me. It wakes us from our slumber. It keeps us connected with the one who not only makes all things new, but makes all things possible. He takes that which is impossible for us, and he shapes us, and he forms us, and he instills in us a very different identity. So that when we are faced with all the trials and troubles and temptations and sinfulness of this world, we are equipped with something greater than that. With a God who says, you are mine. I'm not just a father. I am your father. And I call you to worship, to awaken you from the sleep, so that as you walk through this life, you will know who you are, and you will stay connected to the freedom that gives life. And for that, we give God thanks and praise. Amen.